"Do not pull him away from that well," Nathan Cole said. "He has been waiting for somebody to answer." The two animal control officers froze beside the abandoned orchard, their capture pole lowered but still ready. Between them and the old stone well stood a German shepherd so thin that every breath seemed to move through his entire body. His black and tan coat was tangled with burrs and dried mud. His amber eyes were tired, but they were not confused. He had placed himself directly across the cracked wooden cover, shoulders low, ears forward, refusing to surrender the ground beneath him. Late afternoon light filtered through rows of neglected apple trees, turning the wet grass copper and gray. The air smelled of moss, rain-soaked bark, and the storm gathering beyond the Tennessee hills. Nathan stepped out of his pickup slowly, keeping both hands visible. At 38, he still carried the broad frame and measured movements of a United States Marine, though the faded work jacket and dust on his boots belonged to a man who had been home for years. "Sir, this dog has been here for days," one officer warned. "He is dehydrated, hungry, and guarding the property. We need to move him." Nathan looked at the dented metal bowl near the well. A few pieces of dry food remained untouched. Inside the bowl lay a single red button, small enough to have come from a child's coat. "Has he tried to bite anyone?" Nathan asked. "No, but he will not let us near the well." The German shepherd watched Nathan approach. He did not growl. He shifted one step to the side, then looked down through a narrow gap in the wooden cover. Nathan noticed the dog's paws. The pads were worn and dark with clay, as if he had been running the same path over and over. From the well to the tree line. From the tree line back to the well. Nathan crouched several feet away and placed a bottle cap filled with water on the ground. The dog drank once, barely enough to wet his tongue, then returned to the stone rim. He lowered his head and pushed the cap toward the opening. Not for himself, for someone below. A cold feeling moved through Nathan that had nothing to do with the wind. "Who searched this well?" he asked. The older officer glanced toward the road. "County Rescue. 3 days ago. They lowered a camera 30 feet. Nothing but stone and standing water. The well is empty." Nathan stepped closer. The dog did not block him this time. Instead, he pressed his shoulder against Nathan's leg, then stared into the darkness. Nathan placed one hand on the damp stones and listened. At first, there was only the faint drip of water and the creak of apple branches overhead. Then he heard it. One soft knock from somewhere deep beneath the earth. Ranger lifted his ears. Nathan struck the stone rim once with his knuckles. Silence followed. The officers exchanged uneasy looks. Nathan waited, barely breathing. A second knock answered from below, weaker than the first. The German shepherd turned his amber eyes toward Nathan, and for the first time, the exhaustion in them gave way to something sharper. Recognition. Hope. Nathan looked at the red button in the bowl, then toward the forest beyond the orchard. The well had been searched. The camera had found nothing, yet someone beneath them had just answered. The older officer reached for his radio, but Nathan kept his eyes on the dark opening. The sound below had been too deliberate to be falling stone. Someone had heard him. Someone had answered. Within minutes, the orchard filled with the muted flash of county vehicles, tires pressing through wet grass, doors closing softly beneath the gathering wind. Sheriff Claire Bennett arrived first. She was 47, practical, composed, and carrying the strain of 5 sleepless days behind steady blue eyes. "Tell me exactly what you heard," she said. Nathan described the 2 knocks, the red button, and the way the German shepherd had pushed water toward the well. Claire looked down at the dog, then toward the weathered rescue markings still visible on the stone rim. "We searched it," she said. "A camera went down 30 feet. There was no child, no adult, and no side opening on the old survey." Nathan glanced at the hills, where clouds had begun stacking above the tree line. "Then the survey is wrong." Claire knew Nathan well enough to hear what he was not saying. He had returned to Pine Hollow only 2 months earlier, after his father died, and left him a narrow white house at the edge of town. Most mornings, Nathan repaired the porch, cleared the overgrown yard, and avoided anyone who remembered what he had been before he left. Once, he had served as a United States Marine combat engineer, trained to read damaged structures, unstable ground, and the hidden spaces where people could disappear. He had also been trained to go inside. That part of his life ended after a tunnel collapse overseas took a young Marine named Aaron Cole, Nathan's younger brother. Nathan had spent years believing one decision, made seconds too late, had sealed that darkness forever. Since returning home, he had refused every invitation to join the volunteer rescue unit. He fixed fences. He replaced roof shingles. He worked with wood because broken boards did not call his name in dreams. That afternoon, he had been driving home from the hardware store when he saw the animal control truck beside the abandoned orchard. The orchard belonged to Gideon Shaw, though no apples had been harvested there in more than a decade. Nathan remembered the property from childhood. Beneath it ran forgotten drainage channels, storage rooms, and old pump lines built before the county kept reliable records. The well might have been only one entrance to something much larger. Claire lowered her voice. The Harper children have been missing since Monday. Lily is 9. Ben is 6. We found their bicycles near Mill Road, almost 3 miles from here. She paused. Deputy Daniel Mercer disappeared the same day. His patrol vehicle was recovered empty near the creek. The storm relief cash box was gone. Nathan looked at the German Shepherd. A worn identification plate was partly hidden beneath the dog's muddy collar. He cleaned it with his thumb until the lettering appeared. Ranger, Pine Hollow Sheriff K-9 Unit. Handler, Deputy Daniel Mercer. Claire's jaw tightened. People think Mercer took the money and ran. Ranger turned away from her and lowered his head over the well. Nathan studied the dog's exhausted body, the untouched food, and the small red button waiting in the metal bowl. Then why is his partner still working? He asked. From beneath the stones came a third knock. Nathan turned toward the sound, but Ranger was already moving. The German Shepherd circled the well once, then crossed the wet grass toward the northern edge of the orchard. His pace was slow from exhaustion, yet every step carried purpose. Nathan followed with Claire close behind. 40 yards from the well, Ranger stopped beside a low bank covered in ivy and dead leaves. He pressed his nose to the ground, pawed once at the soil, then looked back toward the stone well. The path between the two places was barely visible, but Nathan saw it now. Flattened grass, mud worn into a narrow line, paw prints overlapping so many times that they had become a shallow trail. Ranger had been running between the well and the bank for days. He is not guarding one location, Nathan said. He is connecting them. Claire called for floodlights and a second search team. While deputies moved equipment through the orchard, Nathan returned to the well with a bowl of soft food and fresh water. Ranger followed, his legs trembling beneath him. Nathan set the bowl down. You need strength, he said quietly. Ranger lowered his head and took one bite. Then he picked up a second piece, carried it to the stone rim, and placed it carefully beside the opening. He stared into the darkness, as if waiting for someone below to reach for it. Claire watched in silence. The suspicion on her face began to give way to something heavier. Nathan crouched beside the dog and examined his paws. The pads were worn from distance, not from circling a single place. Fine gray dust clung between his toes, different from the red orchard clay. Concrete dust. Somewhere beneath the bank was a structure. Ranger pulled away before Nathan could wrap the worst paw. He returned to the ivy, lowered his body, and listened to the earth. Nathan joined him, pressing one ear against the damp ground. At first, he heard only the deep murmur of water moving through old pipes. Then came a soft, broken sound. A child coughing. Claire dropped to her knees. Lily, she called. No answer came. Ranger scratched 3 times at the same patch of soil, paused, then scratched 3 times again. Nathan cleared the leaves and found the edge of a rusted steel plate buried beneath several inches of dirt. A triangular survey mark had been stamped into one corner. He remembered seeing the same symbol on old municipal plans his father once kept in the garage. It marked ventilation access for underground pump rooms. Claire ordered the deputies to bring shovels, but Nathan raised one hand. Slowly. We do not know what is supporting the ground beneath us. Ranger moved back toward the well, walked around it 3 times, then returned to the steel plate and barked 3 times toward the bank. It was not panic. It was a sequence. A message repeated until someone understood. One of the deputies arrived carrying the portable camera used during the earlier search. Claire explained that they had lowered it straight down the well and found nothing. Nathan looked from the well to the buried plate. Because they were never at the bottom of the well, he said. They are beside it. The wind shifted, carrying the metallic smell of approaching rain. Ranger suddenly pushed his nose beneath Nathan's jacket, pulled free the flashlight from his pocket, and carried it to the edge of the steel plate. He dropped it there, then pawed at the dirt until a narrow gap opened beneath the ivy. Nathan switched on the light and aimed the beam through the opening. For 1 second, it illuminated only concrete and drifting dust. Then, from the darkness on the other side, a small hand reached toward the light. The small hand remained in the beam for only a moment before slipping back into darkness. Nathan lowered himself beside the opening, careful not to disturb the soil around the steel plate. "My name is Nathan," he called. "You are safe. Can you tell me your name?" For several seconds, only the hollow movement of water answered him. Then a young voice came through the narrow gap, weak but clear enough to understand. "Lily Harper." Claire closed her eyes briefly, relief crossing her face before discipline returned. "Lily, this is Sheriff Bennett. Is Ben with you?" "He is here," Lily said. "He is cold, but he is awake." Ranger pushed closer to the opening and released a soft sound from deep in his chest. It was not a bark. It was recognition. A small sob came from the other side. Ranger came back. The dog pressed his nose against the steel and remained perfectly still. Nathan could feel the tension running through his body, every instinct pulling him toward the child he could hear but could not reach. "Lily, is anyone else with you?" Nathan asked. The answer took longer. "A man. He found us. He told us to stay on the high part of the floor." Claire glanced at Nathan. "Can he speak to us?" "Not right now," Lily replied. "He was talking before, but he is very tired." Nathan looked toward Ranger's collar. The identification plate carried Daniel Mercer's name. He did not say it aloud. "Not yet." "How did Ranger get outside?" he asked. "There is a little tunnel near the ceiling," Lily said. "He crawled through it. I tied my red button to his collar, but the collar caught on something. The button fell off. I thought he lost it." Nathan looked back toward the dented bowl beside the well. Ranger had not lost the message. He had carried it as far as he could. A deputy brought the old property plans and spread them across the hood of a patrol vehicle. Most of the paper had faded, but Nathan found the triangular mark beneath the orchard. The well connected to a buried pump chamber through a horizontal maintenance passage. The steel plate covered an air shaft, not an entrance. The true access door lay somewhere beneath the eastern slope, hidden by years of erosion and roots. Thunder rolled beyond the hills. Claire checked the weather alert on her radio. Heavy rain would reach Pine Hollow in less than 45 minutes. Nathan returned to the opening. "Lily, do you see water?" "It is coming through a pipe," she said. "It was only on the floor before. Now it is touching the bottom step." Nathan studied the plan. If the old overflow line filled, the pump room would become a collection basin for the entire hillside. Claire ordered the rescue team to locate the eastern access door and requested confined space equipment from the neighboring county. Ranger suddenly rose and ran toward the far end of the bank. He barked 3 times, waited, then barked 3 more. Nathan followed him through the wet grass. Beneath a fallen section of fencing, the dog stopped beside a concrete pipe barely 18 inches wide. Cool air moved through it. Ranger lowered his head and looked inside. The pipe was too small for a person, but not for him. Nathan fastened a lightweight camera and tracking line to Ranger's harness. "Go find them," he whispered. Ranger disappeared into the darkness without hesitation. The camera feed flickered across the rescue monitor, showing concrete, roots, and shallow water. Then the tunnel opened into a dim chamber. Lily sat on a raised platform with Ben beside her. Near a rusted valve lay a man in a mud-covered sheriff's uniform. Ranger crossed the room and placed his head against the man's shoulder. The man opened his eyes. He looked directly into the camera and spoke one name. "Nathan." Nathan stared at the monitor as if the single word had reached through years of silence and placed a hand against his chest. The man beside the valve was Deputy Daniel Mercer. His uniform was soaked with mud, his face pale from exhaustion, but his eyes remained alert enough to recognize the camera mounted on Ranger's harness. Claire leaned toward the speaker. "Daniel, this is Sheriff Bennett. We have Lily and Ben on video. Rescue teams are locating the eastern access door. Can you tell us the condition of the chamber?" Static moved through the feed before Daniel answered. "Water is entering through the old intake line. The lower drain is blocked. We are on the raised platform, but the level has risen nearly 6 inches in the last hour." He paused to gather his breath. Ranger remained beside him, pressing close without blocking the camera. "The children are cold. Ben is tired. Lily has kept him awake. Nathan watched the girl wrap one arm more tightly around her younger brother. Even through the grainy image, he could see the red thread hanging from her coat where the missing button had once been fastened. Lily, Nathan said into the microphone, you did exactly the right thing when you sent that button with Ranger. She looked toward the camera. I told him to find help. He kept trying to stay with us, but the man said Ranger was the only one small enough to get through the pipe. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. He came back twice. The first time, nobody followed. The second time, he stayed outside. Nathan looked toward the well, the empty food bowl, the worn path. The dog had not abandoned them. He had changed tactics. Claire's radio announced that the neighboring county rescue unit was 20 minutes away, while the first edge of the storm was already crossing the western ridge. Wind moved through the orchard, bending the wet branches until apples dropped softly into the grass. Nathan turned back to the old plans. The eastern access door was buried beneath nearly 8 feet of soil and roots. Even with excavation equipment, opening it safely would take time they did not have. There has to be another route, he said. Daniel heard him through the camera. There is a maintenance corridor behind the valve room. It connects to the original pump tunnel, but the inner gate is jammed. Can it be opened from your side? Nathan asked. Daniel looked at the rusted wheel beside him. Only if I leave the platform. The water is moving too fast near the floor. Ranger lifted his head, listening to the exchange. Then he walked toward the far wall and disappeared briefly from the camera's view. The tracking line shifted across the monitor. Seconds later, the image returned, showing a narrow pipe opening above the rising water. Nathan studied the direction on the old survey. The pipe led toward a dry inspection shaft near the eastern slope. It was too narrow for a person, but it might carry a guide rope. We can send a line through with Ranger, Nathan said. Once Daniel has it, he can secure the children before we open the inner gate. Claire looked at him. That still does not explain how he knew your name. On the monitor, Lily turned toward Daniel. He told us about Nathan when Ben was scared, she said. He said Nathan always came back for his people. Nathan felt the orchard disappear around him. Daniel looked into the camera again. Aaron believed that, he said softly. So did I. The name settled heavier than thunder. Aaron Cole had been Nathan's younger brother, the Marine lost in the collapse that ended Nathan's life as a rescuer. Nathan had never met Daniel Mercer, yet Daniel had known Aaron well enough to carry his faith into a dark room beneath Pine Hollow. Before Nathan could ask another question, the chamber lights flickered. Water surged across the floor, climbing the first step of the platform. Daniel reached for the valve wheel and looked at Ranger. Send the line now. Nathan secured a lightweight guide line to Ranger's harness while Claire checked every clip twice. The dog stood still despite his exhaustion, watching Nathan with the focused patience of an animal that understood the difference between affection and assignment. Take this to Daniel, Nathan said. Ranger touched his nose to Nathan's hand, then entered the concrete pipe. The camera image shook as he crawled through darkness, the line feeding steadily behind him. On the monitor, Lily moved closer to Ben, while Daniel braced one hand against the valve wheel. Water crossed the second step beneath the platform. Ranger emerged into the chamber and carried the line directly to Daniel. The deputy clipped it to a metal anchor above the children, then looked toward the camera. Guide line secured. At that moment, headlights appeared through the orchard. The neighboring county rescue unit arrived with confined space equipment, portable ventilation, full-body harnesses, and air monitoring instruments. Nathan did not move until the team leader, Captain Ross, completed the first safety check. The inspection shaft Ranger had found opened into a dry maintenance corridor that ran parallel to the flooded chamber. The air readings were stable. The structure was old but passable. The inner gate remained the only barrier. Captain Ross studied Nathan's military engineering record, then handed him a helmet and harness. You know the layout better than anyone here, he said. You go with me, but you follow my commands. Nathan fastened the straps across his chest and legs. Years earlier, he would have entered without hesitation. Now his hands paused over the final buckle. Aaron's name still echoed inside him, not as accusation, as invitation. Claire placed the radio into his vest. Bring them home. Nathan and Captain Ross entered the inspection shaft with rescue lines attached to the surface team. The passage smelled of wet concrete and old iron. Their helmet lights moved over pipes, cracked gauges, and faded numbers painted on the walls. Ranger's tracking line led them through 2 turns and stopped at the jammed inner gate. On the other side, Daniel spoke through the radio. "The wheel is moving, but the pressure is holding it closed." Nathan examined the frame. The gate was not locked. Water pressure had twisted it against the lower track. "Do not force the wheel," he said. "We need to lift the weight from the bottom edge." Captain Ross positioned an inflatable rescue bag beneath the gate while Nathan cleared loose debris from the track with a hand tool. Air entered the bag slowly. The steel rose less than an inch, then another. Water slipped beneath it in a narrow stream. Daniel turned the wheel. The gate opened enough for Ranger to pass through first. He crossed to Nathan, circled once, then returned to the children as if confirming the route. Lily secured Ben to the guideline exactly as Daniel instructed. Captain Ross pulled the boy through the opening and transferred him to the surface team. Lily came next, one hand gripping the rope and the other resting briefly on Ranger's shoulder. Nathan guided her beneath the gate. "You found us," she whispered. "Ranger found you," Nathan answered. Daniel remained beside the valve wheel. Water now covered the lower platform. "Your turn," Nathan told him. Daniel shook his head toward the children. "They are clear." Nathan listened to Claire confirm both children had reached the surface. "They are safe." Only then did Daniel release the wheel and move toward the gate. A surge of water pressed through the chamber, but the rescue bag held. Captain Ross guided Daniel into the corridor. Ranger followed last. Nathan waited until the dog crossed, then backed away as the inner gate settled into place behind them. In the orchard above, rain began to fall. When Nathan emerged from the shaft, Lily and Ben were wrapped in blankets beside an ambulance. Daniel came out moments later, leaning on the rescue team, but still searching the crowd. Ranger pushed through the rain and pressed his head against Daniel's hand. The deputy closed his fingers around the worn collar. For the first time in 5 days, the dog stopped looking back toward the well. Rain softened over the orchard as ambulances carried Lily, Ben, and Daniel toward Pine Hollow County Hospital. Ranger remained beside Daniel until a veterinary technician approached with a blanket and a bowl of water. The dog drank only twice, then turned toward the ambulance doors as they closed. His body trembled from exhaustion, but he tried to follow. Nathan placed one hand against his shoulder. "They are taking him somewhere safe." Ranger looked toward the road, unconvinced. By morning, news of the rescue had reached every porch, diner, and church parking lot in town. So had the truth about Daniel Mercer. Deputies searching the creek found his patrol vehicle lodged beneath a muddy embankment less than a mile from the orchard. Inside, the storm relief cash box remained locked beneath the rear seat, every dollar accounted for. Daniel had never taken it. He had stopped after noticing 2 abandoned bicycles near Mill Road, followed the children's tracks into the orchard, and entered the underground chamber when he heard them calling. The vehicle had rolled down the softened shoulder during the storm, carrying the radio and emergency equipment with it. Daniel had been trapped before he could report what he found. Outside the hospital, townspeople gathered beneath umbrellas. Some had repeated the rumors. Others had spoken of guilt as though it were already proven. Now they stood quietly, holding flowers, coffee, and apologies they did not know how to deliver. Nathan walked past them without judgment. He understood how fear searched for an easy answer when the truth remained buried. Inside, Lily and Ben were reunited with their parents. Their mother held them both so tightly that no one asked her to let go. Daniel rested in a nearby room, recovering from dehydration and exhaustion. Sheriff Claire entered carrying his clean badge. She placed it on the table beside him. "The investigation is closed," she said. "You did not abandon your post." Daniel studied the badge but did not reach for it. "How are the children?" "Safe." His eyes closed with relief. "And Ranger?" Claire hesitated. At the veterinary clinic across town, Ranger lay beneath a warming blanket. Dr. Emma Lawson had cleaned his paws, given him fluids, and placed fresh food within reach. He ignored it. When anyone opened the door, his ears lifted. When the footsteps passed, his head lowered again. Nathan sat on the floor beside him. The dented metal bowl from the orchard rested near the wall, the red button still inside an evidence envelope. "You completed the search," Nathan said. Ranger did not move. "The children are home. Daniel is alive." The dog looked at him, but his gaze returned to the door. Nathan realized Ranger was still waiting for the only voice that could release him from duty. An hour later, Hospital staff brought Daniel to the clinic in a wheelchair. The moment the door opened, Ranger stood too quickly and nearly lost his balance. Daniel raised one tired hand. "Easy, partner." Ranger crossed the room and pressed his nose into Daniel's palm. The deputy rested his forehead against the dog's head, and neither moved for several quiet seconds. Nathan turned toward the window, giving them the privacy of silence. Daniel finally looked down at the untouched bowl. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Ranger, mission complete." The German shepherd held his gaze. Then he returned to the bowl and ate the first piece of food he had accepted in 5 days. The clinic grew quiet after Ranger began to eat. Daniel watched every bite, as if each one carried the weight of a promise finally kept. Nathan remained near the window, listening to the soft scrape of the metal bowl against the floor. Outside, morning light moved across Pine Hollow, touching wet rooftops, church steeples, and the orchard road where fear had turned too quickly into judgment. Daniel broke the silence first. "Aaron talked about you all the time." Nathan turned slowly. The name still carried a door he had kept closed for years. Daniel rested one hand on Ranger's back. "We served together during our first deployment. He said you taught him how to read a damaged structure before he ever learned how to drive a truck." Nathan almost smiled. He was better at driving than he was at listening. Daniel's expression softened. He believed you would always come back for him. The words did not accuse Nathan, but they found the place where guilt had been living. Nathan sat in the chair across from him. "I was 3 minutes late." Daniel shook his head. "You were 3 minutes behind a collapse nobody could predict." Aaron knew that. Nathan looked down at his hands. "I did not." Ranger lifted his head from the bowl and placed one paw against Nathan's boot. The gesture was simple, steady, and without judgment. Daniel reached into the pocket of the clinic blanket and removed a small waterproof pouch. Inside was a folded strip of paper, damp at the edges but still readable. "Aaron gave me this before our unit separated," he said. "He told me to keep it until I met the man who needed it." Nathan unfolded the paper. The handwriting was unmistakable. Aaron had written only one sentence. "If I do not make it home, do not let Nathan stop being the man who goes back." Nathan read the line twice. Then a third time. The room seemed to narrow around the sound of Ranger breathing and the quiet hum of the clinic heater. For years, Nathan had believed grief was proof of loyalty. He had carried it like a duty, afraid that healing would mean leaving Aaron behind. Now he understood that Aaron had asked for the opposite. Daniel watched him carefully. "You came back yesterday," he said. "Not only for us. For yourself." Nathan folded the note and placed it against his chest. Across town, Sheriff Claire returned Daniel's badge to active status and announced a full review of the orchard property. Gideon Shaw admitted that he had known about the unstable underground system, but had delayed reporting it because he feared the cost of repairs. He offered the land to the county for rescue training and accepted responsibility without excuse. By afternoon, Lily and Ben visited the clinic with their parents. Lily carried the red button inside a small clear case. Ben held a new stainless steel bowl engraved with 2 words. He stayed. Ranger walked to them slowly, then sat between the children while Lily wrapped her arms around his neck. Nathan stood beside Daniel and watched the dog close his eyes. No speech was given. No one called them heroes. The town had spoken too quickly before, and now silence was the most honest thing it could offer. Nathan looked toward the hills beyond the clinic window. The storm had passed, but water still shone in the low fields. He placed Aaron's note in his pocket and turned to Claire. "Is the volunteer rescue position still open?" Claire nodded once. Ranger opened his eyes. Nathan rested a hand on the dog's shoulder. For the first time in years, the road ahead did not feel like a return to the past. It felt like a way forward. 3 months later, the abandoned orchard no longer felt forgotten. County crews had cleared the fallen branches, reinforced the underground chamber, and sealed the old well beneath a new steel cover strong enough to hold a rescue vehicle. A simple wooden sign stood near the stone rim, marked only with the date Lily, Ben, and Daniel came home. No names were carved beneath it. No one in Pine Hollow needed to be reminded who had stayed. On a cool Saturday morning, families gathered along the edge of the property to watch the county rescue team conduct its first training exercise there. Nathan wore a new volunteer patch on his jacket, though the rest of him looked much the same. The same worn boots. The same quiet eyes. The same habit of checking every strap twice before anyone entered a confined space. What had changed was the way he stood among people. He no longer kept himself at the edge of the group. Daniel had returned to duty on a limited schedule and walked beside him with Ranger at heel. The German Shepherd had regained his weight, and his black and tan coat shone beneath the autumn sun. He moved with the steady confidence of a working dog who had finally been allowed to rest without forgetting his purpose. Lily and Ben watched from behind the safety line with their parents. Ben held the stainless steel bowl they had given Ranger, polished bright enough to reflect the trees. Lily carried the red button inside a small clear case attached to her backpack. When the demonstration ended, Daniel gave Ranger the release command. The dog crossed the grass at once and sat between the children. Ben filled the bowl with water. Ranger drank, then looked up at Daniel as if waiting for confirmation that the task was truly over. "Mission complete," Daniel said. This time, Ranger did not hesitate. He lowered himself into the grass and placed his head across Lily's shoes. Laughter moved gently through the crowd, not loud enough to disturb him. Nathan stood near the well with Claire. She handed him a folded county map showing several trails and old service roads scheduled for future inspection. "We have work for you," she said. Nathan looked toward the orchard, the children, and Ranger resting in the sunlight. "Good," he replied. Later that afternoon, after the crowd had gone, Nathan remained behind to check the locks on the training shaft. Daniel waited near the truck while Ranger explored the edge of the trees. The dog stopped suddenly. His ears lifted. Nathan heard nothing at first. Then, somewhere beyond the creek, a faint whistle carried through the woods. Not distress. Not yet. Only uncertainty. Ranger looked back. Nathan followed his gaze, and Daniel reached for the radio. They moved toward the sound together. No one rushed ahead. No one stayed behind. The trail narrowed beneath the pines, where sunlight broke into thin gold lines across the earth. Nathan felt Aaron's note inside his jacket, softened now from being unfolded and read so many times. He no longer carried it as punishment. He carried it as direction. Behind them, the orchard settled into evening, quiet and safe. Ahead, Ranger walked with his nose low and his steps certain. Some promises survive because people remember them. Others survive because a faithful dog refuses to leave until the truth is found. And sometimes a whole town learns that loyalty does not need a voice. It only needs someone willing to follow.